Aquarius. Lately, have you felt like you're standing in front of something very subtle? Not a crisis, not a dramatic turning point, just an ordinary morning, light coming through the window, and suddenly you realize your heart isn't quite in the same place anymore. Everything on the outside looks the same, the job, the conversations, the roles you've carried for so long. But inside, something has shifted, softly, like the second hand of a clock moving into a new minute without anyone hearing the tick. Other people may not notice it yet. You do. And when that awareness shows up, it doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand a decision. It simply stands there, like a door slightly open, waiting for you to ask yourself, is it time to step into a different chapter? In today's video, we're going to sit with that moment together, the quiet space where change begins. Before the world even knows what to call it. There are turning points in life that don't arrive with thunder. They don't knock on the door. They don't demand that you make an immediate decision. They show up like a soft breeze brushing across your mind on a completely ordinary morning. You wake up. The light falls across the floor, just like it always does. Your coffee is still warm in your hands. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a different feeling is standing still, waiting for you to notice it. It's not a crisis, not failure, not even a clear sadness. It's just something no longer fits, like putting on a shirt you once loved and realizing it's still beautiful, still intact, but it no longer reflects who you are today. There's nothing wrong with the shirt. You've simply changed. And here's the quiet truth. This change doesn't need anyone's permission. The outside world may not have shifted. The familiar conversations continue. The roles you've carried are still being called by name, but inside you, a door has opened, very gently. Maybe it's the moment you realize you don't want to argue the way you used to. You no longer feel the need to prove you're right. You're not pulled so easily into things that once triggered you. A new kind of calm is forming, and with it comes a quiet question. Where am I actually headed? What makes this kind of change so powerful is that it doesn't create drama. It doesn't require you to walk away immediately. It doesn't force you to announce anything to the world. It simply invites you to look back at the road behind you. Maybe you've come farther than you realize. Maybe you've tried harder than anyone knows. Maybe you've carried responsibilities no one fully saw. And now, instead of continuing to run, you begin to listen. Not to stop forever, but to understand where you truly stand in your own journey. That awareness isn't weakness, it's maturity. Maturity isn't always loud or filled with bold declarations. Sometimes it's simply the ability to recognize that you've outgrown what once held you in place. You might still be in the same location, working the same job, talking to the same people, but internally you are no longer the same version of yourself. And that doesn't make the past wrong. Every stage had its reason. Every relationship, every challenge, every decision, they all shaped who you are today. It's just that the journey doesn't end there. When you feel this subtle shift, you may begin to see something deeper. Life isn't a series of giant leaps. It's a collection of small adjustments that only your heart can recognize. A slight change in how you respond, a slight change in the boundaries you set, a slight change in where you choose to invest your energy. Those adjustments may look modest, but over time, they reshape your direction completely. You don't have to rush. You don't have to force yourself to have all the answers right now. You only have to be honest about what you're feeling. If it feels like you've reached the end of a certain stretch of road, that doesn't mean you failed. It may simply mean you've completed the lesson that place was meant to teach you. And finishing a chapter doesn't always require fireworks. Sometimes it's just a quiet nod to yourself. And real change begins the moment you recognize that you deserve a wider space to grow. Not because you're lacking something, but because you're ready for something deeper. That moment, as quiet as it may be, holds incredible strength. Because from that point forward, your decisions no longer come from fear. They come from understanding your own worth. And maybe the road ahead doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. It only needs to be conscious. It only needs you to allow yourself to grow just a little more. From here, the story truly begins. After realizing you've reached the end of a certain stretch of road, your first reaction usually isn't to leave. It's to hold everything in place. You tell yourself, Maybe this is just a passing feeling. Maybe I'm overthinking it. So you keep going. You continue the familiar conversations. You continue carrying the roles that once made you proud. You continue meeting expectations that have existed for so long, you can't even remember when you first agreed to them. Everything still functions. You meet your responsibilities. You smile at the right moments. You show up when needed. And yet, at a deeper level, your heart begins doing something very different. It starts to clear space. Not in a dramatic way, not by tearing everything down, but by reorganizing what truly matters, rearranging your values, reconsidering your priorities, rethinking how you give and how you receive. You begin to realize your energy is not an endless resource, neither is your attention. And as you grow, you no longer want to scatter it on things that don't genuinely nourish your spirit. There are conversations you're no longer excited to join. At arguments you no longer feel the need to win. Connections you no longer want to strain yourself to maintain just to preserve an old image of who you were. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. Clear about what deserves to stay. Clear about what needs to be set down. You used to be the one who left the door open for everyone. Now you're learning how to close it when necessary. Not to shut people out, but to protect the space within yourself. This stage of growth takes the shape of intentional silence. You don't react instantly anymore. You don't rush to explain yourself. You don't feel compelled to prove that you're right or that you're enough. That silence isn't avoidance. It's a choice to reserve your energy for what truly matters, a choice to invest in relationships with depth, a choice to listen to your inner voice instead of the noise around you. You may still be in the same place, but internally, you've started packing. You're setting down old wounds you carried far too long. You're folding away expectations that no longer fit who you are today. You're placing aside stories that once defined you, not to deny the past, but to create space for something new. Because a new chapter cannot begin if your heart is still crowded with what no longer belongs there. As you clear your inner world, another human truth becomes impossible to ignore. You cannot continue to grow while trying to please everyone. This kind of maturity doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with grand declarations. It reveals itself in the way you set boundaries without guilt, in the way you say no with calm steadiness, in the way you accept that you no longer belong in certain spaces. And once your heart has been rearranged, a quiet sense of relief begins to settle in. Not because every problem has disappeared, but because you're no longer carrying what isn't necessary. It's a silent preparation for a different kind of journey. A journey where you don't have to strain just to survive, where you're allowed to live in alignment with the freedom and creativity that have always been part of who you are. From the moment your heart begins to clear space, you are no longer standing still waiting for change to happen. You have become someone who is ready for it. Once your heart has been rearranged, something else begins to come into focus. The idea of leaving doesn't scare you the way it used to. We grow up believing that walking away means failure, that staying is what proves strength, that letting go is a sign of weakness. But as you mature, you begin to see that the story is more nuanced than that. There are departures that carry no anger, no dramatic declarations, no doors slammed shut behind you. Just a quiet, honest admission within, I've changed. And when you change, your connection to certain things changes too. This honesty doesn't come from impulse. It comes from long nights of reflection. From the moments you've asked yourself, am I still here because of love, or just because it's familiar? Am I growing, or simply repeating? Those questions aren't meant to pressure you. They show up like mirrors. And you've become brave enough to look. You may not have physically walked away yet. You're still there, still working, still talking. But deep down, you've stopped clinging to what no longer reflects who you are now. You no longer keep a conversation alive just because you're afraid of silence. You no longer stretch a connection thin just to avoid loneliness. You no longer force yourself to remain in a space that has become too small for your growth. This doesn't make you indifferent. If anything, it requires tremendous gentleness. Because to leave something peacefully, you have to forgive. Forgive others. And forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for accepting less than you deserved. Forgive yourself for being afraid of change. Forgive yourself for once believing you weren't strong enough to choose a different direction. This kind of departure carries a different texture. It feels like the tide pulling back. No drama, no rush. Just the water slowly receding, all revealing a stretch of sand you hadn't clearly seen before. And on that open shore, you begin to see what you truly want to build. It may not be an immediate decision, not a grand move, just a shift in how you define loyalty. Loyalty is no longer staying at any cost. Loyalty becomes honoring your own evolution. You begin to understand that you can love something deeply and still allow it to end. You can cherish the memories and still move forward without carrying their weight. You can be grateful for a chapter and still acknowledge that you've learned what it came to teach. This kind of leaving doesn't make you smaller. It makes you wider in perspective, wider in acceptance, wider in how honestly you live. Some people may not understand your silence. They might think you've changed too much, or that you're no longer who you used to be. But maybe the real question isn't whether you're the same as before. Maybe it's this: are you aligned with who you are now? And if the answer is yes, then this shift is not a loss. It's growth. You don't have to make everyone agree. You don't have to explain every layer of your inner journey. You only need to know that you are moving closer to a more authentic version of yourself. Walking away doesn't always mean an ending. Sometimes it's simply the way you create space for something more aligned to enter. And within that space, you no longer feel the same fear. You feel steady. Steady because you understand that your worth is not defined by how tightly you hold on. Steady because you trust that you are strong enough to respect your own evolution. From here, the journey is no longer about keeping everything. It becomes about choosing what truly deserves to remain. And that choice, even when it feels quiet, has the power to shape your future in ways you don't need to fully see yet. After you've accepted that choosing a different direction doesn't mean losing something, you begin to look back at how you used to walk away in the past. There were times you left with a heart still covered in bruises. There were decisions made in the heat of rising emotion. There were steps taken with the quiet need to prove your worth. Those experiences weren't wrong. They were part of your becoming. They taught you about limits, about endurance, about the cost of staying silent too long. But this shift feels different. It doesn't come from reaction. It isn't resistance. It isn't an attempt to make someone realize what they've lost. It comes from knowing yourself more clearly. You understand what kind of space you need to grow. You understand how you want to be treated. You understand what no longer aligns with who you are. And when awareness changes, the way you prepare for a new chapter changes too. You don't gather up old accusations. You don't collect memories as evidence of past pain. You don't carry unanswered questions just to hold on to something familiar. You set things down. You set down what once kept you restless. You set down the thoughts that looped endlessly in your mind. You set down the need to be validated by everyone. This release isn't dramatic. It feels like repacking a suitcase before a long trip. You open it. You look at each item. You ask yourself, do I really need this for where I'm going? Some things once felt essential. Now they simply don't fit the direction ahead. And you are calm enough not to stuff them back in just because of nostalgia. This time, your luggage is lighter. There's no resentment inside, no desire for revenge, no rehearsed story to prove you were right. What you carry instead is clarity. Clarity about your values, clarity about your boundaries, clarity about what you are willing to accept, and what you will no longer allow to repeat. This wisdom doesn't make you rigid, it makes you steady. Steady enough to move forward without noise. Steady enough to choose what fits without guilt. Steady enough to understand that changing direction doesn't mean you lack commitment. Others may not understand your calm. They were used to a version of you that was easy to persuade, easy to explain, easy to return. You're not that person anymore, not because you've grown cold, but because you've learned to value your energy. The greatest difference now is your motive. You're not leaving to escape. You're not moving forward to prove a point. You're simply following the natural growth of your own life. And when your steps are no longer fueled by extreme emotion, they become more grounded than ever before. There's a deep relief that settles in when you realize you don't have to carry your past like a heavy backpack everywhere you go. The past can live in memory, the lessons can live in your heart, but the pain doesn't have to travel with you. Light luggage allows you to go farther, not because the road becomes easier, but because you're no longer weighing yourself down. The clarity you carry now becomes the foundation for what comes next. It doesn't promise a specific outcome. It doesn't paint a perfect picture. It gives you something far more valuable: the ability to walk forward without being tied to what has already completed its purpose. And when you look back, you may realize this shift wasn't a reaction to circumstance. It was a conscious choice, a choice made from the calmest place within you. From here on, your next steps won't be about escaping something. They will be about moving closer to the person you are becoming. After everything you've set down, after your luggage has grown lighter, you begin to see your journey from a different angle. What's happening now isn't erasure. It's not a line drawn through the past. It's not turning your back on what once mattered. You're not burning the bridge behind you. You're simply choosing a new direction on the same map of your life. Picture a satellite quietly adjusting its position in the vastness of space. It doesn't rebuild its entire structure. It doesn't suddenly accelerate. It shifts by the smallest degree. And over time, its destination becomes completely different. Your adjustment feels the same way. On the outside, everything may look familiar. You still show up each day. You still handle your responsibilities. You still carry the kindness that defines you. But internally, your trajectory has been refined. You're no longer chasing validation at any cost. You're no longer defining success by outdated measurements. You're no longer forcing yourself into molds that have become too tight. This shift isn't loud. It's like turning your face toward the sunlight instead of the shadow. A subtle movement, yet enough to feel the warmth change. Maybe you're considering a new environment, a place that allows you to create more freely, a space where your voice is truly heard. Maybe it's a different job, a new field of study, a project you've carried quietly but never felt ready to begin. Or maybe it isn't something dramatic at all. Maybe you simply want to slow down, to care for your mental well-being, to have conversations that are honest instead of polite, to invest in depth instead of surface connections. This adjustment doesn't come from pressure. No one is standing behind you, pushing. There's no countdown clock on the wall. It comes from an inner sense that you're ready for another version of yourself. You don't need to justify it to everyone. You don't need a flawless plan before you take the first step. What you have right now is awareness. Awareness that your worth doesn't depend on keeping everything the same. Awareness that growth sometimes requires a very small but intentional shift. Adjustment is not denial of the past. You still appreciate what's been. You still feel gratitude for the lessons, even the difficult ones. Every experience helped you understand yourself more clearly, and that understanding allows you to redirect calmly. That calm is maturity. You no longer have to leave in the middle of an emotional storm. You no longer have to prove that you're right. You no longer need drama to feel alive. You choose sustainable progress over sudden bursts. And in that choice, there is something deeply beautiful: self-responsibility. Responsibility for the potential you haven't fully explored. Responsibility for the dreams waiting to be nurtured. Responsibility for the future version of you believe you can become. You're not canceling the past. You're building from it. You're not denying what once worked. You're simply acknowledging that who you are now requires a direction that fits better. Others may not notice this shift, but you will. You'll feel lighter when making decisions, more confident when expressing what you want, more at ease when you stop forcing yourself into old frameworks. These are signs that you're living more consciously. The road ahead doesn't have to be fully visible. You don't need to see the entire path. You only need to know that the direction you're choosing makes your heart feel more open. And when you move from this gentle recalibration, you are no longer someone being carried by circumstances. You become someone who shapes your own orbit. No loud noise required. No grand announcement necessary. Just a subtle turn, enough to guide you into a space that truly reflects the person you are becoming. After all those subtle adjustments, you may begin to realize something very simple. A beginning doesn't have to come with a drum roll. You don't need to announce to the world that you're stepping into a new phase. You don't need to write a manifesto. You don't need to prove how much you've changed. Real transformation usually happens in the smallest details. You start sleeping more deeply at night, because your mind is no longer straining to process so many unresolved thoughts. You say no calmly, without carrying guilt afterward. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never truly listening. These changes aren't posted anywhere. There's no audience applauding. Only you know you're different. And this difference isn't loud, but it's real. You don't react out of old habits anymore. You're not pulled so easily by outside opinions. You no longer let your worth depend on how others see you. Instead, you listen more, you observe more, you choose more carefully. A new chapter doesn't begin with a dramatic leap. It begins with changing how you face yourself. You stop blaming yourself for past decisions. You stop clinging to what has already ended. You stop trying to return to a version of yourself that once made everyone else comfortable. You allow yourself to become more authentic. And that authenticity, quiet as it may be, has the power to reshape your entire direction. One day, when you look back at this season, you may smile, not because everything was perfect, but because you were brave enough to change from within. You'll realize you stepped away from an older version of yourself without drama, without collapse, without needing anyone's validation. Just small steps, taken consciously. If this resonates with you, consider it a gentle reminder. You're allowed to grow at your own pace. You're allowed to adjust direction when it feels necessary. You're allowed to seek a space that reflects the person you are becoming. No one else gets to decide when you change. There is no fixed schedule for growth. Everyone moves to a different rhythm. And your rhythm does not have to match anyone else's. What matters is not speed. It's honesty with yourself. The road ahead may still be unclear, but you are no longer standing at the same starting point. You are different, stronger, wiser, more aware of who you are. And for now, that is enough. When you move from this awareness, you don't need to make noise to prove your strength. Strength sometimes looks like choosing peace over drama, choosing clarity over confusion, choosing growth over staying stuck. And if there's one thing to leave you with after all this reflection, it may be this. Quiet steps are not small. They are the foundation of the most sustainable change. A new chapter may have already begun, not with a loud echo, but with a profound shift in the way you see yourself. And from here, wherever the path leads, you will know you are walking it by conscious choice. That is what truly matters.